Welcome to Meet with an Expert, Retirement Basics 101. My name is Shalise Connors. I am the director of the Student Money Management Center. And let me begin by welcoming all of you to what has become a highly requested information session topic. Meet with an Expert, we ask students, what do you want us to talk about? And retirement has come up over and over again. So here we are. The Student Money Management Center is in its fourth year, and we serve all students on all three campuses. We bring programs to you such as the one tonight and so much more throughout the school year. So if you don't already, please follow us on Instagram or Facebook. Our handle is at TWU Maroon Money. And we are so happy to have Dr. Megan Burke as our expert this evening to talk about the basics of retirement, and I will introduce her here in just a moment. We do have a few housekeeping items to pass along. Tonight's info session is also sponsored by the Spend Well Committee, which is part of TWU's Health and Wellbeing Initiative. Joining us here tonight is Stephanie Compton, who is a librarian on the Denton campus and is one of the co-leads for the Spend Well Committee. So thank you, Stephanie, for being super dedicated and supportive of all of our students and the Student Money Management Center. We will be using the chat feature for tonight's questions and answers. If you'd like to unmute at some point and just ask, you're more than welcome to do that. But if you would prefer the chat feature, we will be monitoring that. We ask that you please keep your screen and your microphone turned off during the presentation. Of course, again, if you want to chat or unmute, please do that. Also, it might be helpful to switch your viewer to speaker view so that you can see the speaker and the slide deck throughout the presentation. And just a really quick plug, when you leave tonight's info session, there will be a short 6-question anonymous survey about the program. It will pop up when you leave the webinar. I really hope that you complete it because your feedback helps us improve these programs for our students. All right, so tonight's topic is one, again, that students consistently request. And we're very fortunate to have Dr. Burke here to bring you an introduction to retirement and how do we get there. Dr. Burke has an extensive background in one of her greatest passions, which is accounting. Since earning her PhD, she has taught at Old Dominion University, Texas A&M University Commerce, and Marist College before coming to Texas Women's University in August of 2020, where she currently serves as an associate professor in the Marilee Alexander Kick College of Business and Entrepreneurship. Her husband earned his doctorate in accounting from the University of Scranton, and he teaches at the University of Louisville. They have a very active family. They do a lot of things outdoors, including swimming and fishing and riding bikes, and they are obsessed with Legos. I think everybody is right now. Dr. Burke has also been a volunteer EMT and a paramedic. So, wow, what other talents do you have? Thank you for being here, Dr. I will turn the program over to you now.
Fantastic. So as Shalise said, we're going to talk about retirement basics, right? And this really should be called like the importance of saving for retirement, subtitle, why starting early matters, right? So we're going to talk about something that may seem really far off, right? Retirement. But the earlier we start thinking about this, the more power we have to shape our future. Right, so as she said, I'm Dr. Burke. I'm an accounting professor, so this topic is particularly, near and dear to my heart. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, it will be close to yours as well. So why are we doing this session, right? Why does retirement planning matter? Well, retirement might, again, feel like it's a lifetime away, but that's exactly why it matters right now. Thanks to compounding, time is going to be your biggest asset. A few dollars saved in your 20s are worth much more than large amounts saved later in life, right? So compounding is going to be our friend here. So the power of compounding. Let's assume you're 25. How much do you think a $10,000 deposit today will have grown to in 30 years when you're 55? So sort of what does this look like? So we're going to graduate and we have a family member who really wants to be like, hooray for you, right? And they're going to give us $10,000 and we're very excited about this. And we're thinking like, I'm going to go out and buy a new car or whatever. But instead we're like, you know what? I came to this session. I'm going to put that $10,000 in a savings or an investment account, and I'm going to leave it there till retirement. So we are talking about one single deposit to this account of $10,000 today. We're going to apply all of these business skills that we're going to get from university classes, coming to sessions, online, watching YouTube videos, whatever it is. We're going to actively manage this investment and we're going to earn a 12% return and we're going to be super successful, right? So we have a 35% tax rate. I do that just to sort of keep it easy so we're not changing tax rates all throughout here, right? So we're going to take this $10,000. We're going to put it in this account. We're 25. We're going to let it sit there for 30 years, right? Till we're 55. And what we're doing here is we're going to try to take advantage of compounding, right? And so what does that mean? That means that this year we have $10,000. We put it in our account and it's going to earn a return, right? So what actually happens next year? Well, we're actually going to have an extra $780 after we pay our taxes that we can add to our $10,000 deposit, right? So next year we're going to earn a return on $10,780, right? So compounding really means we're going to earn a return on our return, and we get to continue doing that for the next 30 years, right? So again, we're going to earn this 12% return here, but the government wants a piece of that, right? So we're going to earn 12%, which is $1,200, but then we need to pay some to the government, right? So we only get to keep 780 of that after tax. And then we're going to let that grow, right, for 30 years. So how much do we think we're going to have at the end of 30 years with a single $10,000 deposit at 12%? Any guesses? You can just type them in the chat. Any guesses how much we think we might have after 30 years from one deposit there? Guesses? $5 million? Oh, we're not that good with $10,000. We're not quite that good. So with 30 years of compounding, that single deposit of $10,000 is going to be able to grow to almost $100,000, right? It's $95,184, right? So one deposit there of $10,000 today, in 30 years, we could have $100,000. Right? We were smart investors here, so we were able to get a 12% return, right? Do we think that's reasonable? Well, the average stock market return, let's ignore what's happening in the last couple of days, right, is about 10%, right? So over the long run, the average stock market return is 10%. So doing a little bit of research, right, we could easily get to 12%. What would happen though if we work until 65, right? So 30 years from now is really just, we would be 55. So what happens if we give it just another 10 years to compound, right? So from 30 years to 40 years, or age 55 to age 65, what do we think happens then? So we're at about just under 100,000 here. If we give this another 10 years, what happens? We're at $200,000, almost doubling that, right? So actually more than doubling that. So we've more than doubled our balance by just having those extra 10 years. So to go from 30 years, age 55 to 65, doubles that balance. What if, the Social Security age keeps going up? What if we leave it in there until we're 75? Not necessarily that we're working till 75, but maybe we have other assets that we can rely on, so we can leave this money in there till we're 75. So starting really young, right? We're going to give ourselves 50 years to leave this $10,000 in this account. What happens in year 50? So year 30, we were at about 100,000, right? Just under 100,000. 10 more years, we got to $200,000. Another 10 gets us where? To $425,000, more than doubling with that extra 10 years, right? So we've doubled every 10 years there once we got to that 30, right? So once you get to a certain point, it just adds up very quickly, right? So because we started when we were young at 25, we had all of this time to save. What if we had waited until we were 55 to start saving? Well, we would have been down here, right? We would have only had about 10 years to right here, and we would have had about $21,000, right? So $1 invested today is far more valuable than investing a bigger chunk closer to retirement, right? So time is really our biggest and best asset here, right? We're talking about being a smart investor, but time in the market is far more important than timing the market, right? Timing the market means we're trying to be a smart investor and we're just trying to, game the market, right? Buy the dips, buy low, sell high. But the thing that matters the most here really is just time in the market, right? This return right here, where we're looking at over $400,000, again, that was a single deposit of $10,000 in our 20s. So I'm not talking about doing this every single year. I am going to talk about doing this every year, right? But that's not what this picture is. This picture is literally just a single deposit in our 20s of $10,000, getting us to over $400,000 if we can leave it in there for the long term. So that's our power of compounding. And power of compounding means start early, right? Give it as long as possible to earn a return on your return. Now, again, I'm saying that's a single deposit. What comes next? That next tool we kind of have in our toolbox is what I like to call the power of consistency, right? So we were talking about a single deposit of $10,000. What if we deposit $10,000 every single year, right? How much do we think consistency matters, right? We were looking at a single deposit of $10,000. What if we put $10,000 in every single year for the next 50 years? What does that look like? So now we're a little bit closer on Shalice's guess there, $5 million, right? When we put $10,000 in each year and we earn 12% because we're a smart investor, we're going to pay tax at 35%. You would have $1 million between years 28 and 29, right? So somewhere in here, we cross over that $1 million threshold. At 40 years, what happens? We're in here, right? At 40 years, right? This would be at age 65. You would have over $2.6 million. And if you can do that and leave the money in there until year 50, right? When you turn 75, you would have almost $5.8 million from lifetime deposits of $500,000. Right? So again, $10,000 a year over the next 50 years, you've put in $500,000. What do we get in return? Almost $5.8 million, right? So that's the power of consistency. We're starting early and we're being consistent. So the power of compounding, the power of consistency, right? So we've covered two really important tools, early and often, right? But what else can we do here, right? This is just a savings account, and I'm talking about saving for retirement. So what we want to do next is say, I'm doing my part. I'm saving for retirement. I'm going to ask the government to contribute, right? I'm going to say, hey, government, help me out. I've been paying tax each year on those earnings, right? And so instead of having on that original $10,000, that first $1,200 to keep in my account, I had to pay some tax and I only put $780 in, right? So in those previous examples, we were earning that return of 12% by being a really smart investor, right? But again, we had to pay that tax every single year, right? So we earned $1,200, tax at 35% is $420. So that really left us with $780 to put in. And so the next year it was $10,780. And that's what we grew that return on. What if there, though, was a way to avoid paying that tax, right? And that's what we do when we ask the government to help us out, right? So we'll start with an example where we don't get to avoid paying the tax altogether, but we can defer or put off paying that tax until we take the money out of the account. So what does that mean? That means that we would get to keep that $1,200 and earn a return on that, and we wouldn't pay tax until the very end when we are taking the money out in retirement, right? So the government is helping out by delaying their receipt of tax revenue. right? And that allows us to have more growing in our account, right? So we get to earn a return on the extra 1,200 now instead of just 780, right? So by deferring, we get to put off paying the tax, and the government says, okay, we'll wait until later. And that allows you to accumulate more in your account. So what types of retirement accounts do we have? We might have employer-sponsored plans, right? Those are 401ks or 403bs, depending on the type of employer, right? If you're working for something like a nonprofit. We have IRAs, that stands for individual retirement account. So we can do that on our own, right? We can go down to the bank and we can open an IRA, and that's got a traditional option or a Roth option. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those mean. And then we have Social Security. I leave it on here because I want to make sure that we're very aware that we should treat Social Security like a supplement and not like our total retirement package, right? And we might not have it at all, right? So who knows what's going to happen with Social Security? Do not plan on that being your only source of retirement. So what do these accounts do? They're going to offer some tax benefits, and in some cases, free money through your employer matching, right? As we've just seen, the earlier we start using these accounts, the better, right? And again, Social Security, it's a supplement. It's not going to be our only plan. So let's start at the top and sort of work our way down, right? Let's talk about our employer sponsored plans here. Again, a 401k or a 403b, that just refers to the part in the Internal Revenue Code where we have all of the rules for these. Most of us have heard of a 401k, right? Again, 403b is just similar type of account, just for different types of employers, right? So we have a tax deferred, we call that a traditional 401k, and we also have a Roth option, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about traditional and Roth here on, I think, the next slide. The contributions to these plans will come directly from your paycheck. So you don't even get them, and you're not tempted then to spend the money, right? Your employer just withholds that and deposits it to the account on your behalf. Again, we might have an employer match here, and that is free money. What does that look like? We have employers who say they're going to match, dollar for dollar, up to 3% or 6% of your salary. We're going to use $100,000 because that makes the math really easy, right? So if it's 3%, that says if I put in $3,000 to my 401k, my employer is also going to put in $3,000. So I put in $3,000, and now I immediately have $6,000, right? So if your future job or your job offers these plans, you definitely want to take advantage of them, especially for that match, right? It's an instant doubling in a lot of cases of your money. Now, some, say it's a 50-cent match for every dollar you put in, but still that's free money, right? We make that contribution, they immediately match. Our account balance has increased by 50% or a doubling in 0 time, right? The money just went in there. Some of these accounts, the traditional, are also tax deductible, and that means it reduces your taxable income, which means that it's reducing your tax bill. That means that you can actually deposit more money into your account, right, by depositing the tax savings in addition to your contribution. And we'll sort of look at what that looks like. So to put in $10,000 after tax, I could have put in about $15,000 with something that is tax deductible, or I would need to earn $15,000 before tax to then pay the tax and have that $10,000 available to put in, right? So earn $15,000 to have after tax $10,000 to put in, or since it's tax deductible, I could just put in the full $15,000 to the account. Now, if I have an employer match all the way to the top of that $15,000, I've put $15,000 in, and I would immediately have $30,000, right? And that's crazy, right? That's a huge return. And we've obviously seen it doesn't take much early on to get to really big payouts when you retire. So let's talk about this traditional or Roth. Here I have it in this example talking about IRAs. So again, this is our individual retirement account, right? And this is what we would do if we don't have an employer plan. So maybe we are, working part-time and we're not benefits eligible, so we can't contribute to the 401k. Maybe we are a contractor of some sort, right? And we can't jump in on those plans. Now, I know if you're a contractor, you can actually be self-employed, and we have a lot of self-employed plans that look like 401ks that you can use as well. But here we have some individual options. Again, if you don't have that employer plan, or in addition to saving in your employer plan, you want to do this on top of that, right? You can still contribute to an IRA as well. So these are great for supplementing your employer plans, or if you don't have access, right? Choosing between traditional or Roth depends on when you want to pay the taxes, now or later. You're going to have to pay taxes on it at some point, right? We don't get out of paying taxes ever, but it's really making that decision when that happens. So what does that look like? With traditional, your deposit is going to be made with those pre-tax dollars, right? But that means we can probably get a deduction for it, but the distribution is going to be taxable in retirement, right? So we get to take a deduction for that contribution now, but then when we retire, we have to pay tax on that, right? With a Roth, you don't get a deduction for that contribution now, so we don't get to reduce our taxable income now, but the earnings grow tax-free. And then when we take those out in retirement, we don't pay any tax at all. So in retirement, everything we're taking out of a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, all of that is going to be tax-free. So when do we do one versus the other? We would do a traditional IRA if we have higher income now, or really it's about a higher tax rate. We think our tax rate is going to be higher now than in retirement. And that might be true because we're earning a lot now, and in retirement, we expect our earnings to go way down, or because we think that right now the income tax rate is really high, and we think because of changes in tax law, the tax rate is going to be lower in retirement. The reverse then is true for the Roth IRA. If you're just getting started and you have lower levels of income, right? We're just graduating from college. We have a starting salary, right? Entry level salary. We think that's going to be a lot lower than where we're at in retirement. So we would opt for the Roth account if we thought our tax rate was going to be higher in retirement, right? So if you have low income now, or you think the tax rates are really low and they're just going to increase, you would go with the Roth plan. And again, this applies if it's the IRA or the 401k. Either way, traditional, if we think our tax rate's going down, we go the Roth if we think our tax rate is going to go up in the future, right? So that's just like a very quick rule of thumb, why we would pick one over the other here. All right, so we've talked about using now a retirement plan. So these are qualified plans, again, a 401k or an IRA. There are a couple other flavors, but we don't really need to jump into all of those, right? The idea is we have retirement plans we can do through our employer. We have some retirement plans that we can do on our own, right? You just go down to the bank and you open up an account, you put the money in, right? And you're going to self-manage that. What I want to do here is use the 401k plan as our illustration so that at the end I can show you that employer match and how that helps us out, right? So I'm using the 401k plan because I want to illustrate what happens when you ask the government to chip in. And by chipping in, we're saying, don't take the tax dollars from me now. Wait until I'm 75 and retired and take the tax dollars from me in the future, right? So this is talking about a traditional 401k plan, right? So we're asking here the government to chip in. So our first option was that we were doing active management. We were earning 12%, and we had that in a savings or some sort of investment account, right? We were having to pay the tax each year, right? But now we're going to talk about using, again, that traditional 401k, and we're not doing the employer match yet because we just want to see what happens when we ask the government to help out. So again, we were talking about a $10,000 contribution. Well, we want to sort of do apples to apples with that $10,000 contribution here. So again, when we use the 401k, it's tax deductible So that is going to reduce our tax bill, right? So we want sort of apples to apples, and that means I'm using pre-tax dollars versus after-tax dollars here. So $10,000 after tax is really equivalent to 15,385, right? I said tax savings. This is really a tax payment here, so that should say payment, but we need to pay tax here. We're saving by putting it in this account, right? About $5,400, right? So this is how we get the equivalent. So to put $10,000 in a regular, stock account, $10,000, we would have needed to have earned $15,385 at a 35% tax rate. Again, it's kind of high when you're just starting out, but I wanted to, be able to use the same rate sort of across all 50 years of our savings projections, right? So to make it apples to apples, that's going to be 15,385. Now, I want to compare to what we were doing before, right? Which was that we put it in one time. So we're going to take this $15,385. We're going to put it into our 401k, and we're going to try to be, pretty hands off. So we're just going to put this in the 401k account, and we're just going to let it grow. Right? So remember, option one there was $10,000 in after-tax dollars. We're investing that at 12%. We're paying tax at 35% each year. So the compounding annual rate is really 7.8%, right? After tax, it's something lower. Here we're going to say we're going to put the contribution into our 401k. It is tax deductible, right? So we have that gross up. So again, we're going to put the $15,385 in there. But now that gets to accrue on a tax deferred, which means till later. We're going to tax defer and pay the tax on all of those earnings somewhere down the road, whenever we take that distribution, right? And because we're not actively managing here, we're only going to get a 10% return, right? So we're going to put a little bit more money in. We're going to avoid paying tax until the end, so more gets to compound in there. But we have a lower interest rate, right? So instead of 12%, we're going to let this grow at 10%. So how much do we think we would have then at 30, 40, or even 50 years, right? So how much do we think we have? Now, this again is already figuring that tax getting paid at distribution. So this would be after tax at distribution, how much would we have in the account, right? So by asking the government to help us out and using a tax efficient vehicle, right, the 401k in this case, we have just under $175,000 at year 30. At year 40, we're at about $450,000. And in 50 years at age 75, right, we have $1.17 million. Again, that's from a single deposit into this account, right? So we just did one deposit one time early on, right? And we put that in there and we let it grow. And we said, IRS, we're going to pay you that tax all the way at the end. And by waiting till the end, allowing more earnings to earn earnings or compound as we go, right? We're at almost $1.2 million in 50 years. So the question is, can we make this better? I'm all about making it better, right? We're going to just keep turning dials until we can make it the best thing we can possibly make it, right? Well, we said we put it in the 401k, so we were earning a 10% return, right? The S&P average, right? We're going to earn 10%. But you know what? You can put money in your 401k and you can actively manage the money in your 401k. You don't just have to put it in there and let it go to whatever fund like your firm defaults to. On that investment, they do have a default investment there, right? You don't have to do that. You can actively manage within your 401k. So I can get that 12% return in my 401k as well. So let's see what that looks like. So now I've just done like every 5 years so we can sort of see what's happening. We'll start here at 50 where there's a big difference, right? So this is our smart investor, right? At 50 years, we were a little bit under 500,000. And then we said, you know what? Let's put that thing in a 401k, a tax efficient vehicle. Let's defer paying tax as long as possible. right? We've asked the government to help us out. And we said we were taking a lower return as a result, right? But then I said, just kidding. You can do both of these things at the same time. You can actively manage in your 401k and you can get that 12% return. So what happened, right? Once we did that, we're all the way out here, right? We're at almost $3 million in 50 years. Again, this was just from a single investment. We put that $15,000 in one time. And we said, government, we're not going to pay you till the end. We're going to let that thing grow for 50 years. And we're going to actively manage and get that 12% return. So that one time, $15,000 that we then use to reduce our tax bill by $5,000, right? So that one $15,000 plus $5,000 in tax savings, so really just $10,000 after tax, grew to almost $3 million, right? And that's why I'm telling you that time is your best asset right now, right? We want to do this as early as we can. All right. So I told you we were going to just keep turning levers, right? So this is, we have the money, we're going to do it early. We've now asked the government to pitch in. And I told you before, we can get an employer match, right? So what happens here if the employer matches our contribution? So we're going to put in $15,385. We're going to take a tax deduction and save $5,000, right? So it really is only costing us about $10,000. But our employer would also put in $15,385. Now, your match may not be that great, but this is just sort of for, illustrative purposes here. If we have an employer who's going to match that high, right? They do exist. We could match that high. So now our employer is going to help us out with a match, and the government is helping us out by not taking the tax until the very end. And we're going to actively manage the funds here, right? So we've gone from here, right? And this said, we've asked the government for help. We're in a tax efficient vehicle. We did this one time. We're actively managing. Now we're saying, employer, you should give us money too. I would also like a match from you. Now, it should make sense here that we're doubling the amount of the deposit. So what should happen here? You should see a doubling, right? So we've gone from $300,000 at 30 years to just under $600,000, right? Doubling our money. Give it another 10 years and what happens? We were at 1.86 million, right? We're really bumping it up here, right? What happens though if we can put it in there for 50 years until we're 75 before we need to touch that? Again, I'm not saying you have to work until you're 75, but if you have other assets that you can use, right? And you can leave this money in this 401k and just let it grow. Now there are minimum distributions, right? Required minimum distributions, but the age for that keeps increasing as well. So it's possible that we could leave that in there for 50 years until we're 75. We did that again, one time with the employer match. We're just under $6 million, right? We're just under $6 million. So what have we done in this $6 million case here? We did one time, but we did it really early, right? One time, really early. So we were using the power of compounding to help us out, right? Age is helping us here. We were smart investors. We actively managed in the 401k. We used the 401k, which is tax efficient. So we asked the government to help us out. And we said, hey, employer, you can help us out too. And they put the match in. So we did all of those things, right? And we have just under $6 million from a single deposit. So we have a tool that we learned about, one of the earlier slides, right? But we're missing it here. And which one is that? We started with the power of compounding or starting early. And the other was the power of consistency, right? And consistency said we were going to do this more than once. So what happens if we do all of these things, right? I like to call this one the everything bagel. We're going to throw everything at this, right? So we're going to start early. We're going to ask the government to help, so a tax efficient vehicle. We're going to ask our employer to help. They're going to match. We're going to actively manage here. And then what are we doing next? We're going to do this thing every single year. And that means we're putting in that $15,385 into the 401k each year with an employer match, earning 12%, right? So here, when we did everything except doing it every year, one time got us to almost $6 million in 50 years. What do we think happens if we do the everything bagel and we're consistent and we do this every single year? At 50 years, age 75, you would have $53.7 million. Now that's again after the tax at the end, right? If you took the whole thing as a distribution at age 75, you distributed the entire amount. So you pay the whole tax, the 35% you owe to the government. This is what you would have after you've paid that tax to the government, almost $54 million. And you're like, if I'm sitting on that, I'm not waiting till I'm 75. I mean, okay, right? At 40 years, what do you have? You're right here at $17.2 million, right? That's my everything bagel, right? Like we're maxing out. That's the best I can do. I need to spend some money now, right? Like I need a place to live and I'd like food to eat, right? And so you're like, yes, Dr. Burke, this is great, amazing. I would freaking love to have $54 million. But again, I cannot come up with $15,000 every year for the next 50 years. I'm not always going to have an employer who's matching at $15,000 a year, right? Like you're crazy. Let's like exist in the world of a realist here, right? Again, I want clothes to wear that, are, from this decade. I want a place to live, where like the roof's not leaking on me. What can I do, right? I can't do this. So I'm just going to do nothing, right? I don't want you to walk away going like, I can't do $15,000. I'm going to do nothing, right? So always doing something is better than doing nothing, right? So I get it. $15,000 is a lot, right? You're like, I got student loan payments. That's not happening. Start small because something is better than nothing. So what if I just do $1,000 for the year? Not even, I'm not saying every month. I'm saying $1,000 for the year, right? You take a bonus at the end, your tax refund, whatever, and you put $1,000 into this account, right? So what happens if we do $1,000 a year and we do the everything bagel treatment, right? So we're going to put $1,000 in. We're going to do it every year. So we have consistency. So we're going to start now, right? So we're doing power of compounding. We're going to do this every year. So we have consistency. We're going to do it in a tax efficient vehicle. In this case, we're using the 401k, the traditional. So we're asking the government to help us out, right? We're going to get that tax deduction. So it's actually going to cost us less than $1,000 because it's going to reduce our tax bill, right? But the government is also saying we won't collect the tax until the end. We've asked our employer to help out, so we got that match, right? And again, we're going to be consistent and we're going to do this every year, right? So what's going to happen? After 30 years, so at age 55 here, putting $1,000 in for the year gets you to $540,000, right? Again, if you can wait that extra 10 years until you're 65 at 40 years, right? Where are we at? We're at $1.7 million. And if you can wait all the way to 75 at 50 years, right? You have $5.4 million, right? So where you're telling me like, Dr. Burke, you're crazy. I'm not doing $50,000 or $15,000 a year. I totally get that. But $1,000 a year, every year by starting early, right? Again, look at how much difference we have between leaving it in there for 40 years and getting that extra 10 years running out to 50, right? Huge gains there, right? So again, this says $1,000 per year, right? And again, this is after we pay the tax on the withdrawal. So the amount in the account would actually have a higher balance before you go and pay the tax at distribution. So if we leave all of this in, right, until year 50, and then, we're going to pay the tax, you would have $8.2 million in this account before you paid that tax, right? So we've made quite the improvement in our retirement lifestyle by starting early and understanding our options, right? Again, I did like, let's look at $1,000 a year, right? So tell yourself, can I like find a way to save $1,000 a year so that at the end of the day, when I'm 75 and I decide I can finally retire, or, even just start taking the money out of this account, again, you could have retired earlier than that, I can have $5 million, right? And that's crazy to think about, right? So if we go back to the original example, right? This very well-to-do relative is going to give you $10,000 that graduation gift, and you're like, I really want to spend it. I really want, a new flashy car. I'm going to use it as a down payment on a fancy car. Or I could put it in that account in my 401k and do it this year, right? And I can't just be like, employer, here, I'm going to give you the $10,000, put that in my 401k. What you do is you use the $10,000, right, to cover your bills, and you up your contribution to the 401k through your payroll deductions, right, and have them pull out the $10,000 to put in there, right? But doing that and foregoing the flashy car today means that in retirement, right, you have a much more comfortable lifestyle and the ability to plan and be able to actually retire when you want, right? So again, I'm not saying you have to wait until here, but like starting early and getting to age 65, right, gets you to just under $2 million after tax. And this just says, right, if you can wait just that extra 10 years, right, we're going over $5 million. And again, this is that whole idea that like I can start now and have this amount here, right? But if I wait until I'm 45 because I'm like, I need to, pay for these other bills, I need to pay my student loans, I'm trying to start a family, kids are expensive, daycare is expensive, I can't do it. If you wait and you start, at 55, you only have 10 years to save, right? That's not going to do much for you. If you can back it up to, 45 and you're talking about retiring at 65, right? Still not doing much for you. What you need is to be down on this end. So starting early is really the most important thing. And again, start small, right? This was $1,000, right? So we can try and make that happen. So I'm telling you these huge numbers, right? But like, how much do you really need, right? It's not just about saving, right? We've covered a lot of that, sort of ad nauseum, right? I'm telling you all these amounts you can save. But it is about estimating your future needs and figuring out how best to meet them, right? So how do we do that? Well, in retirement, we have expenses, right? A lot of expenses aren't going to go away. Some of them are even going to increase, like healthcare, right? But you still need to eat, you still need a place to live, right? And maybe you've paid off your house, but you're still going to have real property taxes, you still have insurance payments on that, you still have maintenance, right? So you're still going to have some housing costs. Again, healthcare might be increasing. You still need to eat food. And now maybe you're like, I'm retired now. I've always wanted to travel, so my travel expenses are going to go way up, right? Or maybe they're not, but you really need to think about your own lifestyle goals and what you're expecting or hoping to be able to do in retirement so you can make a good estimate as to what it is that you need as a nest egg to be able to retire, right? Plan for 20 to 30 plus years of retirement, right? People are living longer. So retirement might actually last more than 30 years, right? And we also need to keep in mind that, inflation is going to erode our purchasing power. So we really want to make sure that we have enough money in retirement. So there are some general rules out there about retirement that exist, right? And these rules of thumb sort of help you gauge how much money you're going to need. The first is that 80% rule, and that says that you want to aim to replace, about 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. Now that's, like before tax, before you're putting all this money in. So part of that is that while you were working, you were making these big contributions to your retirement account. Once you retire, you're generally not making those contributions anymore, right? So that goes away, right? Again, maybe you've paid off the mortgage on your house, so maybe that's decreasing, right? Maybe your commuting expenses, you don't need to buy, business appropriate attire anymore, right? So maybe it's going to decrease. But again, the 80% rule says aim for about 80% of your pre-retirement income. So if you're making $60,000 a year before you retire, that would mean that you would need like $42,000 to $48,000 per year in retirement. Again, make sure you're adjusting this for your own personal goals and lifestyle, right? You might be like, I'm really going to go crazy. I'm going to do tons of traveling. It's going to bump way up, right? Um, we also have the 4% rule here. And this is the general safe withdrawal rate to ensure you have enough money so you don't want to draw down your retirement accounts too quickly. So this says each year, I don't want to take out any more than 4% of what is in my retirement account, right? So if I had a $100,000 balance, that's about $4,000 I could take out each year. So looking at 4%, I just told you if you had $100,000, that means I can take out 4,000. That is not going to cover my 80%, right? So with a 4% rule, right? If we said we were making 60,000, the 80% rule, let's go with 48,000, right? So to have $48,000 a year in retirement without any other source of income like Social Security, you would need to have about $1.2 million in your retirement accounts. So you can see how much easier that is to do if we start early and we're saving $1,000 per year, right? So let's back this up. This was the $1,000 example. Right here, this says, if I start early, I can be, and again, this one's already after tax, right? So I would have about 1.2 million here at year 36. So if I start early, I can make that happen, right? When we were doing the really big number, right? What do we have to do? We got to, save a lot of money to be able to bring that down, right? So if we start early, that number can be much smaller, right? You can save $1,000 per year, get that employer match, right? And you can get to 1.2 million, right? We can start at 1,000 now, and then every year, we get a raise. If you get a raise of $2,000, maybe you're like, I'd like to have 1,000 of that to improve my lifestyle. And the other 1,000 now goes into the retirement account, right? Or you come up with some other split there, but you can take those increases and you can put them in and you can be chipping away at those years, right? Or having a larger nest egg, but you would have enough time to make that happen, right? So again, I keep going back to this. Time is our friend, right? We want to make sure that we're using that to our advantage. Now, I also want to make sure that you understand some risk versus rewards, right? All investments are going to come with risk, but there are ways to manage that, right? So a mix of stocks and bonds can help you balance your portfolio, right? And that mix will likely change as you age, right? If you're in your 20s, you can probably afford to invest a little bit more aggressively because you're going to have time to recover from market dips like what's going on last week or so, right? If you're in your 60s, you need to preserve your savings a bit more carefully, right? So the more time you have, the more risk tolerance you have. Diversifying means we don't want to have all of our money invested in, let's say, Apple, right? We want to have some diversification there. And you likely want to be in stocks and bonds, some sort of mix there. There are a number of general rules out there for like how to do your stock versus bond mix. But that's really going to come down to your risk tolerance. So there's no like one size fits all on that. So how much should we save? I mean, obviously, I'm going to tell you start big, right? Save 15% of your income if possible. But we saw that something is always better than nothing. It's not about perfection, right? It's about progress. Starting early, again, even with small amounts, is going to give us a really big head start. We can also think about the 50-30-20 rule, right, to help you balance. That's to balance your needs, wants, and savings. So like in idealistic, perfect land, right? 50% of your pay goes to needs, right? Things that you actually have to have, right? 30% is going to go to wants. And that includes like, I need a place to live, but I want to upgrade that to something nicer, right? The differential there goes in the 30, and then saving 20%. Again, that's really hard sometimes, right? So again, something always better than nothing. Don't let perfection stop progress, right? So don't feel like if I can't do it all, I should do nothing. That is not the case. Do some, it's better than doing nothing. So what other tips do I have to make this happen? Automation is your friend. If you never see the money in your checking account, you're less likely to spend it, right? So set it and forget it, right? Our old rotisserie chicken, right? Set it and forget it, and then just watch it grow, right? We have the expression, right? Pay yourself first. That means that we want to put it into the savings account, right? Have it auto deduct before we even see it. So payroll deductions, do that first, right? And then budgeting. So track where your money goes, right? Cut out unnecessary expenses, and reallocate that to your long-term goals. Budgeting does not mean depriving yourself, right? It's really about being intentional about what that looks like, right? Finding an extra $20 a week could mean thousands more dollars at retirement, right? So then look at your budget. Is there a way to save $20 a week? Right? I'm not going to get into like, stop with your Starbucks and your avocado toast, but like give it a look and see which things have value to you, right? So some of those aren't worth it if you look at how much you could have in retirement. So what are some pitfalls, right? There are, plenty of mistakes that people make in retirement, but knowing what to watch out for, right, will give you the power to avoid some of that. So a lot of people obviously wait too long to start. I've talked ad nauseum about saving early, right? So let's not do that. Start early. Let's make sure we're saving enough, and then watch your risk, right? Make sure that you're getting an appropriate return. So I've talked to you, right? What do we really want to make sure we do? We want to have some sort of action step, right? I don't want you to like just move on from today and just forget about all these things I've said, right? Do one thing today. Open a Roth IRA, put some money in there. Talk to a parent, use a retirement calculator, right? Start that budgeting to see if you can find the spot that you can come up with that money, right? That you can start putting in there, right? Anything to really just start building the momentum, right? So I do want to say thank you for being here. I'm so excited you came tonight, right? This topic is a little bit, adulting, but let's be honest, we're already adults, right? And your future self is going to thank your present self for any of the steps that you take today, right? So let us open this up for any questions that you might have that I can answer for you today. Looks like Shalise just shared some of the really good online calculators that you can use to help out and do some of this planning for yourself.
And I will say that second link that I put in there, by the way, Megan, that one actually, if you're planning on living in another state, not in Texas, and you're curious if I moved and had a career or if I want to retire in another state, that is actually an analysis of what it would take if you wanted to say retire in Hawaii, or if you want to retire in Colorado, not in.
The answer on both of those is a lot more.
Yes, yes. But those are some good calculators. But yeah, we do have a question here.
Yeah, I see that. So what are the various ages of retirement and their benefits? 62, 65, 72, 75. And the answer to that, because I'm a tax person, you're going to get is it depends. And some of that depends on when you were born and whether or not or when you need to start taking required minimum distributions from things like your 401k, right? So having that balance. You've put off paying taxes for a really long time, and the government is like, hey, we want to collect our tax money now, right? So they will force you to start taking distributions. And when and how much those RMDs start will depend on your age, but also when you were born, right? Social Security, similar, depends on when you were born. Sometimes we have reduced benefits if you start taking it early, and that benefit amount that you get paid increases the longer you wait. So I wish I had like an easy answer for that. It really is. It depends, and it depends on when your birthday is, like when you were born, and when you're going to have to start taking some of those things, right? So tax benefits, the longer you can wait to take money out of those accounts, the more time it has to grow, right? So the benefits there are the longer it can stay in, the longer it has to compound, the longer you can put off paying taxes, the more you're going to have. Penalties would be the IRS says that you have to take those minimum distributions, right? Same thing, Social Security, they're going to tell you if you wait a little bit longer, we're going to pay out a little bit more. You're going to have reduced benefits from going early. But at that point, it depends a lot on your lifestyle and your needs. You might be like, I literally cannot work this job another day, right? You might have health issues, family that you need to take care of, right? And so you're like, I just have to start taking the distribution. So a lot of things go into that. So there's no like one size fits all answer on that one.
Do we have another
Okay, so
question?
it's me again. I'm sorry. I'm the one that put that one in there. So, say I was born in 67. I did some variations of Roth traditional IRAs, and I have some small CDs and stuff for just like if I need some fast cash.
Yeah.
But and I let it sit, and then I didn't do anything. Like it just sat there because I changed jobs. Everybody's nonprofit, or yeah, they're nonprofit. And then there's the state. So now I'm working for the state part-time, and I'm not putting anything away, but I'm looking at possible retirement with them, meaning if they have the rule of 90, I think, or rule of 80. My husband retired 2 years ago under the rule
Yeah,
of
so
80.
how that's a combination of years of service plus your
Right.
age. Yep.
Exactly. So he's doing his retirement now, and that's fine, but I guess like you said, it really depends on your lifestyle and what you're doing. My mom never did any of this extra stuff, but she's doing really well. I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm really kind of somewhat hesitant with the taxes and how much. Is there
So
is
for
there a
that,
certain
it's
percentage
usually you
or
want to
no?
take out of your Roth first, right? Because you don't have to pay any tax on that. And as soon as you start taking out of the like traditional plans, you're going to have to pay the tax. So the goal there is to defer as long as you possibly can. So to
And
the
that brings me to another question. Is that going to
yeah,
be the whole thing, or is it just on the portion that you take out?
it's just on what you take out. It's on the distribution only. So
Is there a minimum that you cannot be taxed on?
So
Like
some
if
of
I
that
only take
depends
out
on whether or
2,000?
not you
Okay.
if you took a deduction for it as you were putting money into a traditional account, may
Mhm.
create basis. But again, once you reach a certain age, the IRS says, I want my share. And so then they have required minimum distributions. And you
Okay.
have to take out at least that much. You can always take out more than that. And then you end up paying tax on whatever the piece that you take out is.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't want to manipulate all the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Megan, we did have a question. Well, actually, it's my question because you were talking about traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, and if you have a lower income starting out, as probably some of our students do,
Yep.
and they're going to contribute to a Roth IRA. What does it mean when people say you need to max out every year? What's that mean, and is that a tax benefit if you can?
So maxing out, these all have, because they have tax preferences, right? Generally avoiding paying tax in some way, either now or later. They tell you there's a maximum amount that you can put in. And that amount is sort of indexed for inflation. And then the older you get, we have catch-up contributions. So older people can put more into these accounts. So maxing out means whatever the maximum is for this year, let's say it's like $10,000, they mean put in $10,000 into that account if you can, right? So go up to whatever that limit happens to be. And again, they're all indexed for inflation. They all have a different limit. And then we have, the catch-up provisions as you get older. So again, sort of a range of amounts there that are maxing out our contributions.
Because they won't let you it sounds like they won't let you just indefinitely put money in a Roth IRA every single year.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
you have a cap. Okay.
There is a cap to your contribution, the amount you can put in. Now, the earnings can be however awesome your earnings are, right? Like if you find some sort of amazing stock, right? You know, bought Apple early on, right? When it was in a garage or whatever, or you bought Amazon when it was in a garage or what, you know, you could have earnings. There's no cap on that. It's really just the contribution going in that we cap.
And if I can put a plug in here, because you made a great point, if you get that $10,000 wonderful graduation gift, congratulations, and you want to use that and use your earnings from your paycheck to pay off that initial, I guess, funding of your employment account, right? Your employee base matched account, your 401k. I would suggest you guys want to make an appointment with the Student Money Management Center. We can talk about different vehicles you could put that $10,000 in, and it would make money for you. Now, don't stick it in your savings account. Put it in a high yield savings account, or we can ladder it with CDs and make it stretch out. So there are really so many ways for your money to make money for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have any other questions? I did put the link in the chat for to make an appointment. If you guys want to make an appointment with the Student Money Management Center, we're a great free resource right now. Use us, because when you get out in the big world and you're adulting, sometimes those financial planners can cost you some money. They're really good.
Yeah,
they're really good, but we can give you the basics. So I don't see any other questions. All right. If I'm going to share my screen now real quick.
Yeah. There we go.
All right. So thank you so much again, Megan, Dr. Burke. This was a much needed primer on retirement, about saving often, saving early. Thanks to all the students who took time to participate. We hope you found this very, very interesting. I also want to thank the Spendwell Committee for their support. This is a slide right now that I've got up here about Maroon Money Month. We are almost done. We're in the final weeks of Maroon Money Month. We've been putting together all kinds of different programs to raise awareness of the importance of financial education, such as tonight's program. And here on the screen is the schedule for the rest of our Maroon Money Month. And the best way to keep up with all of our giveaways and workshops and online info sessions and so much more is to follow us at TW Maroon Money on Instagram and Facebook. You can always check the TW calendar of events or Pioneer Engage as well. We still have some one-on-one financial coaching sessions. They're available before the spring semester ends. So please make an appointment to come see us. That link I said is in the chat. And we're really glad that you guys participated this evening. Thanks so much. Thank you, Dr. Burke. Thank you, Stephanie Compton. And thank you, students. Really do appreciate it. You all have a very nice evening.